Everyone. Our next session today is from Robert. Robert is a director of the UK chapter of the OpenStreetMap Foundation, and today he's going to be talking to us about SurveyMe, which is a tool to locate areas or things that could do with in-person surveying. So I'll hand over to Robert.
Okay, thanks a lot. So, I'm Robert Whittaker. I'm a long-time OpenStreetMap contributor. My day job is a maths lecturer at the University of East Anglia in Norwich, but my research actually has almost nothing to do with OpenStreetMap, although I have touched on it a couple of times. In my free time, I enjoy walking, cycling and running, and really love Sarah's Waymark Trails site. I've also got an interest in civic engagement and government transparency and open data in general, and I think that's sort of probably what drew me towards OpenStreetMap originally. And over the years, I've written various OpenStreetMap tools that you can have a look at my website, and they're often comparing external data sources with what we've got in OpenStreetMap to try and improve the OpenStreetMap data. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this tool I've put together called SurveyMe. And it combines the output from various other tools that I've written and some other bits of data as well, with the aim of flagging issues in the UK where it would be useful for someone to go there in person and check something, and then hopefully add some missing data or correct something that's wrong in OpenStreetMap. So why did I create this? Well, first of all, I wanted a way to see the results of some of the other comparison tools I was running all in one place, rather than having to check multiple things if I was going somewhere. I get a little bit obsessed with mapping post boxes. I didn't want to miss a post box if I was out somewhere. And then there are other tools that want to miss other things either. I also wanted something that would show me things that were worth a quick check, maybe when I was out with family and friends that aren't obsessed with OpenStreetMap, because they'd get rather annoyed with me if I kept peering at my phone, mapping every single little thing along the way. There are lots of other great mapping tools and QA apps available, but I don't want to be going down a street filling in the opening hours for every single shop if I'm out with friends. They get rather annoyed with me. So I wanted something that would just show me a few more significant bits that I might be interested in mapping when I was out. And those other tools sort of flag too many things, or also include issues that are sort of desktop fixes rather than things where you need to be there in person. So I sort of put together this tool, and there's various sort of data sets going into it and other QA checks that I do, and here's a list of all the stuff that goes into SurveyMe. So various external data sets that come from either the government or other projects. And you can see there's a range of different sorts of stuff in there, that all of which I think it's really good to map in OpenStreetMap. And there's also a few sort of internal checks on OpenStreetMap data, so finding things that you generally expect to have a name tag but don't, and often you need to go there in person to find out what the name is. So that's the sort of stuff that goes in. Here are some numbers for you, so you can see the sort of scale of this. So a column with the number of entries in the external data set, a column with the number of entries that we've got of the same sort of objects in OpenStreetMap. And then these two columns are the sort of issues. So these are things that I think there's something missing in OpenStreetMap, or there's something in OpenStreetMap that maybe shouldn't be there. And then there's a sort of total for the QA issues as well. So we've got sort of 270,000 issues across the UK. And that's a bit more than 1 per square kilometre, but obviously they tend to be clustered in urban areas. So there's lots of stuff that you can go out and find to do if you're in a new area. So this is sort of what you get in SurveyMe. There's an interactive map online at this address, and you can also download these little markers as a GeoJSON, a GPX, or a KML file, and then load it into your GPS receiver or favourite mapping app. And then if you can go around and tick off some of those bits as you're passing. So the different markers, they're showing either things that are missing, which are generally with a white logo, or things that are unexpected in OpenStreetMap because they don't match some of the external data. And then the little icons give you a clue as to what sort of thing it is that's either not there or should be there. So how does this sort of work under the hood? Well, I need to get the OpenStreetMap data, and I need to get the external data and load it all into a database and then do some matching. So I use the Overpass API to collect the OpenStreetMap data. I've got some scripts that will update each tool roughly once a week. For the larger data sets, I split the UK up into a grid of small rectangles and collect one each in turn, and then store the object ID, the latitude and longitude, and any other relevant tags that I want to do some checking with as well. That may not be the best way of doing it. Probably I should get an OpenStreetMap extract and use that. But this is just kind of how the tools are evolved from the beginning. I'm not sure I've got the server space to download a massive OpenStreetMap extract, but it's something I'll look at anyway. And then for the external data sets, there might be officially published data sets. Things might be requested using the UK's Freedom of Information legislation. And there's one project that scrapes company websites to find stores. So we can get all that data, load it into a database, and then do some matching between the external data sets and the OpenStreetMap objects. So this is sort of halfway through. So I've got the external data set locations and I've got the OpenStreetMap locations with the two different coloured circles here. So this is for pharmacies in Dundee. And you can see there's sort of some correlation between them, which is good. So there's quite a lot of instances where we've got a red circle and a blue circle next to each other or nearby, and they're probably the same pharmacy. So we need to do some matching between them. And I've got a fairly simplistic approach to this, but it seems to work pretty well with a little bit of tuning. So if we're lucky and the external data set has some unique IDs in it, and it's licensed so we can use them in OpenStreetMap, then hopefully people might see this as a good thing and add the external IDs to OpenStreetMap. And then we can be really confident that we've got matches between the OpenStreetMap data and the external data set. If not, then we're sort of having to do a bit more of a sort of fuzzy matching. So one thing that's quite helpful is using postcodes. So if the dataset's got postcodes in and people have put postcodes in OpenStreetMap, that helps you match up the right objects, particularly if you've got a few fairly near to each other or the location data in the external dataset is a bit ropey. It's amazing, I think, how many companies don't seem to know exactly where their stores are. They also don't always know exactly what their postcode is, but maybe one of the two will enable a good match. And then if I've exhausted unique IDs and postcodes, I just base it off location. So what I'll do is I'll go through the objects in one of the data sets, find all the nearby unmatched objects in the other data set within some fixed distance, because I don't want to match a pharmacy in Edinburgh with one in Aberdeen just because there aren't any more left. And then match the closest object. And I found it works reasonably well if you take a few increasing distances. So you've got issues of sort of if one of your data sets isn't complete, you might match the wrong object if you just go for the closest one each time. So I sort of look in a small radius first and match the closest one, and if there aren't any in that radius, I go to a slightly bigger one the next time I go through the data set, and that seems to work quite well with maybe sort of 3 distances. So depending on how good your external data set is, you might do sort of 50 meters, 150 meters, 500 meters or something like that. And then anything that isn't matched after this process, you flag as an error or warning. So you might have things in OpenStreetMap that aren't matched, where maybe a store's closed, or you might have things in the data set that aren't in OpenStreetMap, where it just hasn't been mapped yet. So after doing that for the pharmacies, you can see there's a few pharmacies that look like they're missing in OpenStreetMap. That one is no longer missing because I went past last night. I think. Oh no, I didn't. No, that was a different one. But that's, I think that's a super drug that probably isn't tagged as a pharmacy, but probably should be. So if anyone's passing there, do go and check that out. So a few thoughts now on what I think makes a good external data set to use for these sort of comparisons. So if anyone's thinking of setting up something like this, there's a few things that from developing these tools that I think might be useful to think about before you start. And I think the first one to think about is that you want a really good one-to-one correspondence between what you've got in your data set and what you can get from OpenStreetMap. So if you don't have that, then the warnings or errors that you flag up aren't necessarily going to be reliable. And I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. You obviously need to have a good data set in terms of sort of completeness and accuracy. So does it actually contain all the things you think it contains? So I sort of got a little bit bitten. So the Gambling Commission in the UK is supposed to maintain a list of licensed gambling premises. It turns out it does this by getting local authorities that actually do the licensing to send it diffs. So it's just the local authority just informs it when something changes. And they do this sometimes with bits of paper and emails. And there's no way to like reset this. So once an error gets in, it stays there forever. And the Gambling Commission says, oh, well, the local authority would have told us. And the local authority says, oh, yes, but we told them. So no one actually fixes the data. So their data set of gambling premises is pretty useless. You also need reasonably accurate location data. Again, it's quite surprising how many companies don't know exactly where their stores are. But maybe if they've got a postal address, people can find it, so they think that's okay. Often get sort of spurious locations miles away from where they're supposed to be. So maybe to work around. Sorry? I am. I think it's actually cutting out. It's really good if you've got unique IDs in your data set. Even if they're not licensed for use in OpenStreetMap, it helps you run your database and check things from one version of the data set to another. It's good if your data set's got regular updates. It's even better if they keep the same data format between updates rather than keep messing around with the columns that they choose to include or the format of it. It's really helpful if you've got the ability to automatically download and import the data into some database that you're running. So having a stable URL that you can always fetch the data from rather than having to go through 2 pages of web forms to get the download and then get an Excel file and then have to save it as a CSV and then import it. It's kind of helpful if you can just press a button and it all just works. Having an OpenStreetMap compatible license is really good, but you can still do these comparisons even if not, and it just flags things for people to go and survey on the ground. If you have got a license to use the data, then maybe you can do a bit more and you can actually use it to add things in without having to visit if you've got good enough information about the place. And finally, having a dataset owner that's receptive to feedback and error reports is quite handy. So often there'll be mistakes in the data, and it would be kind of nice to feed that back and get it fixed. And some people are interested in doing that, and others maybe less so. So a little bit of a diversion now on this sort of one-to-one correspondence between the data set and what you can get from OpenStreetMap. And if there are any issues with that, then you'll get false positives in any matching that you're doing. So you might get entries in the data that actually shouldn't be mapped in OpenStreetMap. So they're not really sort of things that are missing. So some examples, some retailers, if you go to their store finder, you might find branches that aren't actually branches of that store, but they're just a concession inside a department store. And depending on how that's set up, it's something that we might not actually think about mapping in OpenStreetMap. I mean, just because there's a little branded corner of a department store, we wouldn't map that as a separate shop. The defibrillator data that I've got includes defibrillators that are inside private office buildings, and whilst the office building might be happy if someone's having an emergency to give the defibrillator, it's not something that we'd generally be able to sort of go and map easily. So we wouldn't necessarily expect them to be in OpenStreetMap and probably don't want to flag them up as missing. So there's a little bit of workarounds to be implemented there in any tools. Maybe pre-process the data sets to remove any of these sort of items that you don't want, or maybe keep the entries but don't flag them as errors if they don't appear in OpenStreetMap. You can also get false positives from entries in the data, entries not in the data that are legitimately mapped in OpenStreetMap. So for example, the tool I've got to compare post offices, not all the amenity equals post office objects in the UK are what we think of as the government-owned company called the post office. So you can have third-party private companies that run things that look a bit like post offices and get tagged like that in OpenStreetMap. Also, healthcare equals clinic is used for both standalone clinics that might appear in a data set of healthcare locations, and also hospital departments. So you might have the radiography department in a hospital is tagged like that as well. And if you want your comparison tool to not flag up those errors, then you probably need to have some secondary tagging in OpenStreetMap that helps you distinguish these objects and allows you to include the ones that you don't want. I've some things for the yeah. Is that better? Right, let's see how this goes. So I've got some tagging in those that I can recommend to enable my tools to distinguish between these, and it also adds a little bit more useful information to OpenStreetMap in the process. Okay, and the third set of false positives, you can get some entries in the data that might correspond to more than one legitimately mapped object in OpenStreetMap. So for example, a single GP surgery or doctor's practice in the UK might operate from multiple locations, and we tag each one of those with amenity equals doctors or healthcare equals doctor, depending on your preference. Supermarkets will often have a petrol station next to them with a separate little convenience store next to the petrol station. But on the supermarket's branch finder, they just have one entry for the whole site. So we'll have a shop equals convenience and a shop equals supermarket that should correspond to one entry in the data. So again, there's maybe some workarounds you need to do with that. If you've got IDs to match with, you can just give the same ID to multiple OSM objects and say that the tool will accept that. But you might need to have some other sort of tricks in the tagging to try and identify sets of objects that should be grouped as one entity. So one thing I do is look at the website that's been associated with these things, and if you see the same website, then maybe it's actually the same site, and you can match them all together. Also, running a little bit out. Try and say a little bit about my use of all the places data. So this is a really cool sort of open source collaborative project that runs scrapers that go through company websites and pull out branches. And it's a major source of data in SurveyMe. And I've got a separate tool that sort of runs with this. And it compares OpenStreetMap objects that have a brand Wikidata value matching one of the brands with the branch list from all the places. And there's various work that I have to do before I can use the all the places data. So often the scrapers on the company websites break and end up missing out half the branches. So you have to watch out for that. Do some filtering on what it returns. So get rid of non-UK branches, filter out unwanted branch types, remove some duplicates or closed stores. So some companies will keep the page up for their store and just put closed in the title and not actually have any machine readable way of telling that it's closed. So there's some work to do to filter those out. Correct some of the assigned brands. So if OpenStreetMap's decided to break Tesco up into Tesco Express and Tesco Extra, you maybe have to do a little bit of work to fix that. And maybe fix some other things as well in the data that might not be quite right. And then there's a bit of work on OpenStreetMap to make sure that the tagging there is working with the matching. So you have to check that all the objects have the brand Wikidata tag, otherwise you'll get a whole load of missing stores, but they're actually mapped, they're just not sort of tagged with the brand tags. Maybe merge some duplicate objects, split some objects that should really be two entities. Brand tags often get left behind on stores that have been closed, so it's marked as a disused shop, but the brand tags are still there, so it still gets picked up by the tool. And there's some sort of overpass queries you can use to try and find these errors all together rather than going through each individual store. And these checks you sort of have to do before you introduce a new comparison. It's also useful to sort of recheck them every so often to catch any sort of errors that have accumulated in OpenStreetMap. And there's also a few tricks in the tool to help with the matching. So some of the issues that I mentioned earlier. So petrol station convenience stores attached to a supermarket are a particular issue. So I try and work around that. Also, you'll find cash machines, vending machines, warehouses that get tagged with the brand tags that I'm not interested in. So I need a way to ignore them. And there's a few special cases as well that I have to deal with along the way too. But a little bit of work and you get a much better tool out of it. Okay, so some final thoughts. So I think there's lots of really good data sets out there that can be used to help improve OpenStreetMap. Licensing and data quality issues probably mean that a lot of them you can't use for direct imports. But you can run comparisons and flag up issues that can still be really useful. However, there's a significant amount of effort that you need to sort of clean up the OpenStreetMap data beforehand and also pre-process some of your data sets to get them into a good state to get a good comparison. And I've tried doing this with SurveyMe, so do give it a go next time you're somewhere new in the UK. It is UK only, I'm afraid, because that's kind of my interest, and the amount of work you have to do to understand the data and process it means I can't really manage to do any more than that. But if anyone's sort of interested in these sort of tools, I'd encourage you to try building something similar for your own country and region. But do be warned, if you want to create a good tool, you need to have a good understanding of both the OpenStreetMap data and your external data, and probably be prepared to work around some of the quirks in that. Okay, so that's me done. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I hope that was interesting for you.
Hi, Robert. Thank you for this presentation. I just wanted to know if you're thinking about showing all those principles and experiments to the Open Data Institute or Open Knowledge Foundation, which is in the UK. I think OpenStreetMap UK maybe have really useful insights for them regarding the tools you're providing. We may have the same thought in France as well. So can you share a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I haven't kind of talked to anyone about it. I mean, I just made the tools because I found them useful, and hopefully other people find them useful as well. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good idea to talk to other groups that may be looking at similar things and open data. I think one thing that perhaps other third parties don't think of as much is the benefit of us feeding back errors to them. And I haven't really had much success with trying to do that. Maybe a little bit with the public defibrillators. I've been talking to the people that run the national database of that. Unfortunately, it's a little bit complicated about who actually manages that data. It's done on a sort of more local level than the people organising the database. I'm surprised they're not slightly more interested in knowing that 1% of their defibrillators aren't where they think they are, for instance. But we'll see.
Oh, can you hear me? Yeah. I was just wondering if you've used Ordnance Survey data that's freely available at all, or if there's use limitations on it, or they just don't have any open data that's actually of use.
So in terms of sort of points of interest stuff, I don't think there's anything that's available that's open. I do use information of sort of open data information about postcodes that tell me where they should be. So some of these data sets don't have locations, but they do have postcodes. And as long as you don't have too many of these objects, I think the pharmacies maybe don't have locations, but they do have postcodes. But there aren't so many pharmacies that tends to be a problem. So if you've got a pharmacy in the same postcode, it's probably the same pharmacy. So I use the postcode information for locations sometimes.
I was wondering about import-export kind of features. Like, would you be open to reading files that someone else generates for outside of the UK? And in the other direction, wouldn't it make sense to maybe offer the same stuff as challenges on, say, Osmose or Street Complete?
So for stuff outside the UK, I mean, surveying itself just pulls in data from other tools. So in theory, I could include other things in there. Whether I'm wanting to put the effort in to do that, I don't know, because it's quite a lot of effort maintaining the stuff I've got. But it might be nice to. In terms of exporting stuff, I'm open to ideas if people have other tools where they would like to get the data. I do take in some data from other tools. So there's someone who does food hygiene ratings comparisons in the UK, and I get a feed of OpenStreetMap objects in the UK that have a number that doesn't exist in that data set. So they're things people have tagged previously that have probably closed. So I sort of consume that and add it in. So I mean, potentially I'm open to doing that. And certainly if there's a export format that would be useful for someone else to use, I'd sort of be happy to look into that as well.
Robert, this working okay? I think you are brilliant. That's why I'm sitting so far away from you. I work in TomTom. I've not been involved in maps too long, maybe a few years. And I actually came across the All the Paces project when I started. So we've put some, I think, effort into that, as you know, with young Ian Deese over in the States who runs that. And my kind of observation of maps is it's about places, it's about roads. You know, OSM has done pretty well with roads, if you look around. The places, well, it's not so hot. And the way the world's moving now, the brands, the retail chains, the hotels, the petrol stations, that's what people want to see. And the way you're going about it is exactly the right way. And it kind of echoes the talk from the lady yesterday from National Trust, where she was saying, you know, we want to publish the data in OSM, get it out there. So no real question, really. Just congratulations, and the observation on licensing and all this stuff on data on people's websites is nobody is trying to hide. That's it. I'll speak to you later.
Cool, well, thank you.
I think that's everyone. Should we call it a day? Thanks very much, Robert.